Welcome, Pokesports fans, to Pokesports, a competitive Pokemon podcast. I am your host, Mike, and I play with one Pokemon on the field.
I'm Kevin, your host, and I play with two Pokemon on the field.
And
What's up, Mike?
today, well, what's up is an interesting question.
Not me.
Listen, okay, so this one's going to be interesting for a variety of different reasons. Reason number one, we are not currently live on Twitch. We are the current day is January 12th, 2020. If you're here on Twitch, then it's not that day. Reason being is Kevin is on vacation this week. So we have decided to record a full 7 days early. We're still going to be, well, I'm at least still going to be in the comment section of this video. In the Twitch chat. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask that, and I'm going to be incredibly active with answering those as much as I can. But Kevin, you are going to be, where are you going to be?
I'm going to Cancun, Mike.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, for a whole week. But we didn't want you guys to miss an episode of Pokesports. And originally, like, one of our thoughts was like, oh, we'll just take a week off. But with the reception you guys have been giving us, like, we really don't want to. Like,
yeah, we don't want to stop.
Continue this.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, we want to keep going.
Every single week. We went through Christmas. We went through New Year's. Why would we skip a vacation?
Yeah.
All right. So that being said, Kevin, I'm glad that you're not here this week. It's weird because I'm talking to you in Mike. in past tense, like you're gone. But I'm glad because I barely want to be here this week. It's the math episode. Hooray! We're here. Listen,
Mike, I heard you had a lot of fun.
I had a lot of fun putting this together. I racked my brain for days and days trying to get my mind around it. For those of you who are new with Pokemon, I feel for you. For those of you who are like a little older and understand that numbers have a big factor to play with Pokemon, I feel for you. It's really, really hard to understand if you're not wired for that kind of thing specifically. So we're going to try to explain the numbers and the stats and the damage calculations behind Pokemon as easily as we can, because that's the only way that I'm really gonna get it. Yeah. And then if you guys want to really get in deep with it, then feel free to do your own research and see. But this is going to be a nice way of kind of getting into that. So
now, Mike, I know you went through a lot of pain putting this together.
I did.
But I just want to let you know that I'm excited to actually learn what a lot of these numbers do, because most of my knowledge from Pokemon comes with experience. It's kind of like second nature. Like, you just know how much you're gonna do.
Yes.
Just like off the top of your head, but you don't know why. And I constantly find myself in scenarios where, like, this move is in the sun, but this move is stab. Which one will do more damage? This one has 90 BP. This one has 85. Like, I'm always in that scenario.
I feel like it's like that with a lot of people, myself included. Like, just through years and years of playing the game, you can kind of gauge like, oh, this move's 4 times effective. It's probably going to take it out. It's probably going to do a lot of damage. I'm probably going to take it down to half. And I would say I'm accurate probably 70 to 80% of the time. Just like always increasing with how much I play the game. With Sword and Shield, like, again, beginning of it, you don't really know exactly how big the defenses are for certain Pokemon or how big the offenses are, but eventually you start to realize that, oh, Dragapult can one-hit KO a lot of stuff. You can kind of start to really gauge things like Dragavish and see what Fishious Rend can and cannot take out. And that's why now I know not to switch certain Pokemon out when there's a Dragavish on the field. And if it's got rain up, then I just leave.
You leave or you change the rain?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the two.
Yeah, mostly leave. So this week's, an interesting one, obviously, because we're recording this one on the same day, actually, that we did episode 10. But it's interesting in the fact that news is going to come next week because, obviously right now we don't know what happened in between January 12th and 19th. However, if there was anything super interesting, Mike over in the comments will tell you all that. Good stuff. But for now, we're talking about numbers. We get a lot of people asking us about how numbers work in Pokemon, when to invest defensively, how best to do that, when to spec offensively, how to calculate damage, etc. And so today we're going to be breaking down all of that for you guys.
Taking a big step back here. Like
Yeah,
as far back as we can go.
hopefully
Down
without
to the
getting
basics.
too math nerdy.
Yeah.
So buckle up tight. If you're here in the Twitch chat, just know I'm in this with you. We got to get through it though, because that's Pokemon for you. It's super important. So that said, let's get right into it. Today, I want to start with how stats are influenced. Obviously, you know that there are the six, I think, stats in the game. You've got HP, attack,
Yeah.
defense, special attack, special defense, and speed.
Mhm.
All of those things can be affected by lots of different factors. You've got abilities, you've got moves, EVs, IVs, items. The whole reason that we're doing this episode today has a lot to do with specifically EVs and natures as well. Uh,
Mhm.
IVs, reason being IVs are typically maxed at 31, unless are specifically trying to not have those IVs. It's usually either 31 or 0. You don't really
Yeah.
see anything in between that.
Especially now that hidden power is gone. Yeah, always on 31
Exactly.
to 0.
Yeah. Those are the baselines for good Pokemon. You want to go until you see that best title beside every stat, best or no
Mhm.
good in Trick Room cases. Or even, I say Trick Room cases, but that's not true either. If you have a specially offensive Pokemon, you do want 0 attack
0 attack, yeah.
in attack, or 0 IVs in attack, because of things like play rough. Um, so there's that. But anyway, abilities are usually one or the other. Like your abilities are abilities. That's just kind of that. They don't really play
Yeah.
too much into the stats. They play more into the good Pokemon sets. Items, again, pretty constant. You really only want to put certain best in slot items for those kind of Pokemon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I mean that's that. Then the investment of EVs is really what makes a Pokemon a Pokemon. Um, but what I found interesting about doing all that research is when it comes to EVs, the level actually has a ton of what to
Mhm.
do with making a Pokemon what it is. It can make the difference between a Pokemon living at 1 HP and completely getting knocked out. Uh, in Pokemon, you'll know that the level 50 cap uh, is a thing. All Pokemon are equalized to level 50. And it
Yeah.
does make a difference to a lot of Pokemon in some very, very specific ways. And we're going to get into that right now. But Kevin, what do you know about how stats are influenced?
Um, in terms of things that you didn't mention, I think you
Mm,
pretty much covered it all. I mean, mostly with the level 50 cap. I know there are certain scenarios where instead of every 4 EVs increasing a point, it's every 8.
mm-hmm,
So there are certain scenarios where technically having 252 on a Pokemon, you might actually be missing a stat that you can add somewhere else. Like that's where the numbers get a little confusing. The most basic one is just 252, 252
mm-hmm.
on, just whatever your
252,
Pokemon is
252,
good
and
with.
4. Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere. But yeah, there are Pokemon I know like uh the first one that comes to mind is Snorlax.
Mm-hmm.
Because Snorlax wants to belly drum, right? Like you want to cut your HP in half evenly. You don't want it to be an odd number. So in order to do that, you would have to not fully invest in HP, rather drop your HP from 252 to 244 so you could be one stat point lower to
Yes.
split it evenly.
It's basic knowledge now that having an even HP number is not great, which
Mhm.
kind of makes it a little tough when you get into things like Dmax. But Dmax, you get a whole that number added onto your HP anyway, so
Yeah,
it
belly
gets
drum's
kind of
the one
nuts.
scenario where you'd want even each HP. That's just like the one and only scenario.
Why is that?
Because you want it to be split in half so your citrus berry procs.
Oh, I
Yeah,
see. I see. I see.
that's the only one I can think of. Other than that, you want an odd number.
Mm-mm-mm. So the level 50 cap, uh, pretty
Mhm.
common knowledge that Pokemon battle at level 50 unless you're using some kind of custom rules. A common misconception, though, is that Pokemon stats at level 50 are exactly half of their level 100 counterpart, which is 100% not true. Like that
Mhm.
just isn't the case.
That's
It
first thing I learned.
Yeah, well, there you
First time
go.
I'm hearing that. Yep.
It's not like everything is cut
Okay.
in half. It
Teach me,
scales.
Mike.
It scales, and I'll tell you exactly how.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. A lot of
What
it,
does it
again, has to
oh,
do with EVs, and we'll get into that.
does
Uh,
it scale with experience? Is that why?
Not exactly, but
Oh,
experience does
okay.
scale. It does take a ton more to get to a level, from 99 to 100 than it does from even 98 to 99. But anyway, I
Yeah.
digress. Pokemon do tend to do and take more damage at level 50. The damage calc range is a lot bigger. We're going to get into the calculation of that
Okay.
as well. I like you can tell by the little matrix thing behind me. I am I feel like I went down a knowledge spiral and I just kept learning things and I was like, wait, really that too? Oh my god. Okay, what
You
this? Oh,
you know that meme
yeah.
with, like, the lady looking at the camera
Yes,
and then those
exactly that.
numbers? That's Mike right
That is
now.
me. That is me. So stats are rounded differently, and again, mainly has to do with EVs and natures. So let's get into EVs. What we're going to do before the break, actually, we're going to do EVs and natures, and then after the break, we're going to get into damage calcs and distribution and some helpful tips to help you in your game. So EVs, known as effort values. In Sword and Shield, you get them by knocking out certain Pokemon as you progress through the game, or by giving your Pokemon supplements, or by doing Poke jobs in Sword and Shield. Um, each of those effort values has a certain attribute, right? So you can get HP EVs, you can get attack, defense, all of those stats. At level 100, well, actually, let me backtrack a little bit. So you can put a total of, I want to say, 252 plus 252 plus 4 plus
508.
6 actually. So 508
Yeah.
EVs onto your Pokemon. 510 actually, but that
Yeah, but
extra 2 doesn't
only
matter.
only
Yeah.
508 count most of the time.
Correct. So you can put all of those EVs onto your Pokemon. At level 100, it takes 4 EVs to increase one stat. So if you put a max of 252 on a Pokemon, that will give you 63 stat points. There's a full max of 255, and I don't actually think you can hit that anymore. I don't think the game lets you
No.
because it just doesn't. It never made sense, and
Mhm.
they decided to cap it 252. So that can give you a total of 63 extra stat points in that given stat. So 63 extra HP, 63 extra attack, 63 extra defense, and 63 extra speed. So here's where it gets a little tricky though. At level 50, it takes 8 EVs to increase one stat. So at 252 EVs, you're only increasing a stat by 32, which is 31.5, exactly half of 63 stats rounded up. And the way that it rounds is a little different case to case as well. But fun fact, I don't know if you knew this, there are actually also level 5 tournaments. You can have a level 5 tournament, Little Cup. Yeah. That's where it takes 64 EVs to increase one stat.
Jeez.
Yeah. It takes 64 EVs.
Okay.
And so at that rank, speed tiers are just super useful to know.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because they differ very, very vastly.
One stat in that tier makes or breaks a Pokemon. Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Nuts.
From there, we move on to natures. Natures, there are natures for every single stat. I'll put that up here, minus HP. That increases one stat by 10% and decreases another stat by also 10%. There are some natures that do absolutely nothing, but
You don't want
I'm
those.
going to hazard a guess and say 99.9% of the time, you never want to put a nothing nature.
I'm gonna hazard by saying 100 the time you never want to.
Yeah, I guess I took the safe way there. But yeah, just you can't do it. You shouldn't do it.
Yeah. It's not smart.
Yeah.
Get yourself get yourself an adamant. Thank you.
Exactly. Typically, you want to increase the stat that benefits the most from the 10%, and you want to lower the stat that benefits the least. So let's take Corviknight, for example. Min-maxing, exactly. Kind of, yeah. I guess that is all what Pokemon is. It's just a bunch of min-max Pokemon. Corviknight is a perfect example for this. Corviknights, they're usually bold, which increases the stat that it has the most of, right? Its defense stat is the highest out of all of it. So bold is plus defense and minus special attack, because it is never a special attacker. Do not use Corviknight as a special attack. Let me tell you right now, look at me. Do not use Corviknight as a special attacker. All right, I will find you.
And if you guys are unsure what nature to stick on a Pokemon, this such a safe thing to do is obviously look it up, but also look up the stats of your Pokemon, see what it excels at, maximize it. See what it doesn't excel at, minimize it. That's pretty much it.
In a lot of cases, you want to do that. Yeah. You know, a good baseline is, again, with the Corviknight thing, look at what it lacks within its moveset. So a lot of times you'll see like, oh, this Pokemon's really high with special defense, like say Blissey, but it's really, really low with its defense. So the thought with that mindset is like, oh, okay, let's just reduce the defense. Don't do that. you're gonna hurt.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So again, boosts with EVs, they how should I say this? Boosts through natures, they're calculated after boosts to stats by EVs. So if you put that at level 50, that 32 stats in, and then you boost that stat with your nature, you're getting a 10% on that EV investment. So you're getting 35 stats rather than 32. So that's why a lot of people, they put EVs into the same stat that they're putting the nature in, because that does, increase as well.
Whole 3 extra stats. Yeah,
exactly. So those are the basics, and that's what we're going to be basing a lot of what we're talking today about and on. I don't want to. It's very bare bones, and it gets a lot more complicated from here. But I want to take a couple seconds to let that digest. I'm gonna let you think about that for a bit while we take a break. But before that, Kevin, do you have any thoughts on EVs and natures combined? Or are we good?
No, we're pretty solid. If you guys have any questions on this episode, because I know we are talking, we're giving a lot of detail.
Yes.
In like just 1 hour, we're going over a lot of numbers, a lot of concepts,
yes,
and a lot of things that, things like me and Mike, we didn't really know this before we did the research. So I'm sure that there are a lot of people out there, whether you're a veteran Pokemon player or you're just picking up the game for the first time, that don't know this. We have an email, Pokesportspodcast@gmail.com. Send us your questions there. We will respond to you.
I am equal parts terrified, and I'm sure that comes through with my voice, but I'm equal parts terrified and excited to talk about this topic, because it's something that I have always really wanted to know, but never really gave me the excuse to go and do the research. And this podcast kind of finally gave me the opportunity to do that. But I'm also terrified because I know how badly people hate numbers. I don't want this podcast to suck. So
no. They hate numbers, but they love us, Mike. It's okay.
Thank you. Okay, let's take a little break. Break. Kevin, what are you planning on doing in your vacation?
Right now, just pretty much getting away from my job, relaxing. We're staying at a resort that's like paired with 5 other resorts. So you can easily just take a ferry and go to any other one. They have like attractions, they have beaches, they have pools, free drinks. They have a lot of things. Free food, everything. It's all inclusive, so just relax.
Nice.
For a week. I'll find things to do. It's just me and my girlfriend going, so it'll be a good time.
Really? Oh, it's just you two. Cool.
But yeah, it's just a couple vacay.
That's great. What are you guys going to be doing at 9 p.m. on Sunday EST? Who even knows what time it is? Cancun.
Well, I think I'll be an hour behind.
No, actually. Wow, it's the same time. Same time zone.
On time?
Yeah.
Okay.
So 9 p.m. Once you guys are done dinner, You sit back and you're like, hey, you know what? I think I know this pretty cool podcast. Let's take a look.
Let's see how long we've been going for. We've been going for 23 minutes.
Yeah.
So at 9:23, I will show up in the chat and say hi to Mike. Mike, that's what I'm gonna do.
Set an alarm for 9:18.
Hello,
Head on
everybody.
over. There you go. Exactly. Greetings
I'm gonna
from
try
Cancun.
to time that perfectly. I'm just gonna say hello and then type in the chat hello at the exact same time.
You're making a big commitment right now.
Hands-free typing is happening right now. Oh geez, now I have to do it.
Yeah, you do. Exactly. You just made a very strong commitment, and people in the chat will be very upset if you don't.
Geez. If I don't come, unfollow.
No.
Unfollow me. You keep following Pokesports. They don't need to be punished.
And if you aren't following me, just now you have room to add in a StillJustMike.
Yeah, follow Mike instead of me.
Yeah,
that was a great idea. You spent time on this.
I did spend
it's
time
so
on
sad.
this.
We kind of did divvy up the work this week. Like I wrote last week's, and you wrote this thing.
Yep.
I think that
whatever this is.
You got the short end of the stick here because mine was a great time to write.
Yeah, and that was a good time to stream too. I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah, it's hype. It's hype season, baby.
Exactly.
And I was gonna say, and Pokemon timed this so because right when their game was starting to die down, smack takes some DLC.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm still super excited for the expansion passes. I think those are going to be really cool. This topic is very timely for that, because a lot of what makes those Pokemon cool that are coming in is a lot of heavy hitters who really played with the damage calcs really well. Those are coming in. Like I know I mentioned last week about Nidoking coming back. And Nidoking was amazing because of all of its crazy coverage and its Sheer Force Life Orb, and those play with the numbers like nobody's business. Sheer Force increases your power by like what, 50% or something?
Yeah, something stupid.
But it removes the secondary effects, and then Life Orb, the secondary effect was that it did damage, and the primary effect was that it added 30%. So
yeah, you just get another 30% on top of your 50.
Just for free.
Yeah.
Exactly. I do actually want to make sure that I'm right on that. That Sheer Force increases by 30%. Yeah, it was. Sheer Force increases by 30%, not 50%.
So it's like having 2 Life Orbs.
You're having 2 Life Orbs without the detriment of Life Orb. So that's pretty insane. Speaking of damage calcs, let's get right into that. This one's going to be a bit of a convoluted and a difficult concept to understand if this is your first time. But again, like I said, I'm going to hold your hand. We're going to walk through this together. So I hope you're ready, because we're here for you. Okay. So all Pokemon, when they're attacking, have a range of damage that they can do. There's a super long calculation. Damage calculation.
I've seen the calculation before. Yeah, it's not something you want to memorize. It's like having the quadratic equation times 2.
It is, but at the same time, it's not. Like when you look at it, like you're looking at a big equation on a chalkboard. It's like, how does anybody ever figure this out?
It's intimidating, but it's straightforward.
Yeah. But let me break that down a little bit for you. So when damage is calculated, you have the number 2 times your level. You divide that by 5 and you add 2. I don't know how they figured that out, but they figured that out. You have that in your brackets. You multiply that by the attack's power, and you multiply that by the attack divided by defense. So your attack divided by the opponent's defense. All these numbers, like, they make sense in the context of what you're doing. And it's like, yeah, okay, they would have attack in the calculation. They would have defense in the calculation. You divide all that by 50 and you add 2. All of that, and I'm going to have all this up in the screen, is going to be multiplied by a modifier. Now, the modifier is where you get your min, max, and your ranges. Yeah. So your min damage, your max damage. Your modifier calculation is the amount of targets, which means like a spread move damage, or not, right? If there's more than one target, your damage is down to 0.75.
Yeah.
And if not, then it's just 1. So that number 1 times weather, which is 1.5 if a certain
Or
weather moves up,
50%. Yeah.
rain, drought, sand,
Mhm.
hail. Um, that either goes to 1.5 or that just stays at 1. So you're either doing, 0.5 times 1.5 all the way down to 1 times 1. Easy. Um, Badge is another one that you multiply by, but that's from Gen 2 only. So we're going to skip that one. Critical is another one. 2 times for a critical hit from Gen 2 through 5, and then 1.5 times critical hit from Gen 6 onward. And then 1, obviously, if it's not a crit. And that has its own like RNG element. So it's either a crit or it's not, depending on the critical hit chance. Random, you multiply that as well. So it's targets times weather times critical times random. Random is a factor between 0.85 and 1. And that's all done through a random number generator.
Mm-hmm.
So you're always either doing, 85% of your damage or 100% of your damage, anywhere between that range.
Yeah, that's the min max.
Mm-hmm.
So more often than not, when you attack a Pokemon, you're not actually attacking it with your move damage.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
Because it's any number between those two, which is like an infinite amount. I don't know how many decibels they go down, but
Right.
that's the whole randomness that comes to Pokemon. That's why you kind of want to, when you calculate you're not going to have to remember all of this. What
Yeah.
Mike is doing is explaining it to you.
Mm-hmm.
If you use a computer, if you have access to the internet, which you probably do if you're listening to this podcast, is they have damage calculators. Websites like Smogon have damage calculators. Um, Showdown has a damage calculator. Uh, you can input all of your moves, and they'll tell you whether or not the move is a guaranteed OHKO, or what percentage of that move, what percentage of the time that move will get an OHKO
Right.
against an opposing Pokemon.
And just so everybody knows, I know we've said it a couple times, OHKO, when we say that, it's an acronym for one hit knockout. So just keep that in mind. So anyway, let's keep going though. You multiply random by stab. Stab is another acronym for same type attack bonus. So it's 1.5 times the move's power. Sorry. Well, it's either going to be 1 if it's not same type attack bonus, or 1.5 if it's the same type as the move that you're using, or 2 if you have adaptability. So that's something to keep in mind. Type is the next thing you multiply that by. Type effectiveness, which is either going to be 0, which is ineffective, which is just going to nullify the whole thing and give you a, immune alert, 0.25 or 0.5, depending on if it's 2 times resistant or 4 times resistant, 1, which is normally effective, 2 or 4, which is super effective, depending on the moves and the target's types. After that, you multiply that by burn, which is 0.5 from Gen 3 onward if the attacker is burned and is using a physical attack.
Yeah.
As long as the ability is not guts. Other than facade. The only thing that isn't calculated in there is facade. And that's just kind of how the programming works. It just drops burn from the whole thing.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so the whole reason that I wanted to kind of bring that up, and then other, is that actually I should, before I do that, the last thing, the last modifier part of that is other. So if you have things like multi-scale, which is like calculated completely differently, like if your Pokemon's at full health, then you cut the damage. The reason that I'm bringing all that up to calculate damage is these are all of the things, not specifically that need to run through your head, but you need to do like a couple checks and balances to make sure that none of these factors are really messing with your ability to do damage. So within the modifier category, you're thinking about in this order, not in this order, but these are what should be going through. If you're playing VGC, am I attacking with a spread move? Is a certain weather element up? Is rain going to help me? Is rain going to hurt my fire move? Is fire going to help me? Is fire going to hurt my water move? Is there a certain item that enables crit chance more? Like you have a what is it, scope lens on? Like, is that an item that I have? Is that an item that I don't have? Same type of attack bonus. Exactly. Like what's a move? There it is. Exactly. Same type attack bonus, and is the move that I'm using the same type, and that's an easier one to kind of internalize and know what you're doing, because you're basically building your Pokemon like that in the first place. Especially type of what you're facing. Are you burned? Like, is there status involved that's going to mess with this? Are there other factors that are going to ruin my ability to actually do damage? Volt absorb, water absorb, multi-scale, all that kind of stuff. They're all things that you need to keep in mind and really know when you're doing damage calculations. And then you also have to know that there is a random element in there. You have to know that sometimes your moves will not be doing full damage. That's just how it goes.
And sometimes if you use the same move the next turn, it might do more or it might do less. It depends. It has that 15% chance of, just being completely different calculation.
Yeah.
Actually, it's what, 85% chance? I don't know. I'm bad at math. That's why Mike did this episode.
There you go. There are plenty of great damage calculation sites out there that you can go and check and just kind of test out. If you have specifically like Pokemon who you feel are losing to certain Pokemon often, I would highly suggest going to the damage calcs and finding if the Pokemon that you're using against the Pokemon that you're losing against, if there are moves that Pokemon has that you can take out those Pokemon efficiently with, if those exist. That's why a lot of things like coverage moves exist, and why Pokemon, like, I'm going to keep bringing it up, but Nidoking is so great because it's just so versatile and has lots of different typing moves that can deal with all of these Pokemon out there. If there's a Pokemon that is weak to electric moves, Nidoking's got you. If there's a Pokemon that's weak to poison, Nidoking's obviously got you. If there's a Pokemon that's weak to whatever, Nidoking has a lot of that. And if not Nidoking, then anybody else. I'm sure there are always Pokemon that can take out other Pokemon.
A good example this generation is Gyarados. Gyarados previously didn't have a way of taking care of other water type Pokemon.
Yes.
And this generation they gave it Power Whip.
That's right.
So that is a very strong move, especially when you're trying to take out the opposing Pokemon, because you do have that type advantage. Then you would obviously go for a Power Whip. I guess maybe it's not so obvious, but you would go for a Power Whip against a water type versus, say, a Waterfall.
Right.
For that reason.
Right. Exactly. And that's why things like Energy Ball have been the bane of my existence for Seismitoads, because so many things have just started using Energy Ball that didn't previously or commonly used it before.
Yeah.
So like other Seismitoads are coming out and using Energy Ball on me, and I'm like, whoa, hang on, what? It knows this now?
One of your older videos.
What's that?
One of your older in like I think your first stream highlight, you had what was that? Galvantula used Giga Drain on your Seismitoad, and you're like, oh well.
Yeah, exactly. I switch it out because I'm pretty sure that Galvantula doesn't have a reason to, because previously I used to run Galvantula pretty often. And if I think about it hard enough, now that I'm out of the situation, it did get Giga Drain for a long time. But usually its set would just be Sticky Web, Thunder, Bug Buzz, and I believe Protect, something like that. That. And it barely ever ran Giga Drain. I don't remember it having Giga Drain. Anyway. But that was just that. I want to go into the distribution of defensive IVs. It's like
a distribution.
Yeah, absolutely. The way that you distribute defensive IVs. Sometimes most of the time you'll put just 252 and 252, but there are some times where you don't want to.
Oh, you're talking about EVs, not IVs.
Did I say IVs? Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. I even have written here IVs. I do want to talk about EVs. Yeah.
Mike's brain melted during this.
My brain has just been melted for the past
confused.
forever.
I'm like, wait, it's just 31, right? I'm not wrong.
But no, we do want to talk about defensive EVs. So the way that you spread your defense, you do have your three factors that go into it. You have your HP, your defense, and your special defense. However, One thing that I don't think a lot of people know is that if you have a defensive or especially defensive or a Pokemon with high HP, it's not always best to put in specifically HP and one part of defense. Sometimes it's better to put in defense and special defense. Sometimes it's better to put in HP and special defense. Like there are ways where you can objectively check to see how much benefit you get from which stat you invest heavily or more into. I'm going to get into
in
that
order
right
to
now.
optimize it. Yeah.
Exactly. So you're building a defensive Pokemon with EVs without doing the Pokemon equivalent of net decking. Do you know what net decking is, Kevin?
Not at all.
All right. So net decking, it's a card game term. People who play the
Okay.
TCG would know. People who play Hearthstone, Magic, what have you. Basically, that's when you go on the internet and you take a meta deck and you build it. Like you're not creating your own. Picolytics. Exactly. Picolytics is net
Now
decking.
I understand.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Picolytics, Smogon, those are all just resources that people use to copy and paste Pokemon and Pokemon sets. Typically because they have proven to be the highest performing. And if there is a set that outperforms that current one, then it's typically updated later on. So net decking is usually your best way of figuring out what the best current set is, but
especially if you're starting off. Yeah.
Exactly. But if you want to innovate and you want to create new sets, then you kind of have to know a little bit about what you're doing, and this is kind of one of the ways that you can do that. So if you've been playing the game a lot, which is again the best way to understand your opponents and the other Pokemon in the game, or you've been losing a lot, I want you to consider this. When you invest EVs into a Pokemon, the smaller number will receive the most benefit. And I'm going to get into what that means. Does that make sense? That makes sense, all right?
Yeah, because percentages. Yeah.
Exactly. So HP investment provides coverage against physical and special moves, but sometimes it may be more wise. It may be wiser to actually add a specific type of defense. Big example that I see a lot is Chansey, Blissey. A lot of Chansey sets have them put in a lot of Blissey sets have them put in defense rather than special defense or HP, because if you put in a full investment into special defense, you put in your 32 special defense EVs, your stats, you're bringing that up by only a small percentage. But if you bring those defenses, those EVs into the defense category and you're adding in your defense EVs, that increases percentage wise by way more. So an easy way that I can kind of explain this, like let's just deal with full 100 numbers, right? If you go from 100 to 132, which is a 32% increase in any given stat, that's great. But if you're going from like 50, which is half of that, to 82 by adding in those same 32 EVs, that's a 64% increase. So you're either increasing your highest stat by, in this case, 32%, or you're increasing your lower stat by 64, which means you're going to live a lot more, say in the example between defensive and specially defensive, you're going to live a lot more defensive move or physically offensive moves because your defense is a little bit higher. Like the example that I saw with Blissey was that it lives like 90% more physical attacks by having the increase in defensive EVs compared to if you just have the increase in HP, because the calculation is
that's nuts.
Yeah, because again, Blissey's HP is just so high that you're increasing it by fully investing in HP by only like a certain like very, very small percentage. But if you put that in defense, that increases your defense percentage by way more than HP.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, learning from the master, I did that's like something that I just honestly had no idea.
Yeah. Honestly,
Okay.
it's something that
I
like the
had
more
no
you play,
idea.
the more you kind of get it.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay.
mhm.
So that just takes what I said before and then just turns it upside down. Like, you don't always want to invest in your biggest stats. Sometimes you want to invest in your lacking stats because you'll get more of a return for your investment,
Right.
I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of cases where you specifically don't want to do that. Like if you're talking specifically like Corviknight, like we already mentioned Corviknight
Yeah.
today, you do want to put all of your investment into defense because its
Attack.
defense is
Oh.
so naturally strong.
Mhm.
You can put it into attack. That's totally another set that you can do. But if you're building a defensive Corviknight, you want to put that into HP and defense because
Mhm.
it will survive almost anything as a completely defensive wall. Plus, if its special defense is high enough that you don't really need to worry too much about that, it'll just naturally survive a lot of attacks just normally. The extra HP will certainly help that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's what I wanted to tell you about distributing defensive EVs, not IVs, properly. Now, last thing before we get into our spotlight, I want to tell you a couple of helpful tips that you might not have known to give you a minor competitive advantage. So for those of you again who are newer to the game, or even those of you who have just kind of been feeling it out, sussing it out since you're a kid, and have been reaching mild success, consider some of these for your game. Maybe you'll take yourself to the next level. Maybe it'll spark some interest in learning more about the actual stats and the way that the game works, and you create yourself a major pro. Moves like Substitute, Curse, Clangorous Soul, Belly Drum, they all take HP from the user. If you're building Pokemon with a certain amount of HP, it's helpful in some of these cases, not Belly Drum, to make sure that their HP is odd. And the
Mhm.
example for this is if you have Pokemon that uses Substitute, that takes away 25% of that Pokemon's HP. If a Pokemon has an even amount of HP, like 300, and that takes off 25%, that's 75 HP. Substitute won't work if it's down below 75 HP. If it's
Yeah.
75 or below, it just won't work.
Mhm.
But if your Pokemon is at 299 HP because you've removed, in this case, 8 HP EVs from it that you currently had, or you added 8 HP EVs to it, and it's brought down to 75 HP. Actually, only for the 299 example. Substitute
Mhm.
will only do 24 or 74%, 25%, which is 74 points of
Yeah.
damage, since percentage moves are rounded down. And my head hurts from explaining this, but listen, it works. You bring yourself down 1 HP, and suddenly you are living a lot more substitutes because you're brought down to that same number, but you know,
You're
you're
losing less
you're losing.
HP.
Yeah, exactly. So you
Yeah.
can reinvest that into things like defense or special defense to kind of make up for that 1 HP difference. You just put that in defense or special defense to have you live certain moves a lot more.
Make it compensated, yeah.
Exactly. This changes a bit when you're talking about specifically like Omolo with Clangorous Soul, because Clangorous Soul only does, I want to say it's 33%, but it might be 30, but it doesn't do 25%. It does a little bit more.
Okay. That's just too much math, Mike. Yeah,
Yeah,
belly drum, you wanna be even. That's, like, the only scenario I can think of.
exactly.
Uh,
So
and then something that Mike didn't mention is that also if you're an odd HP and you're playing singles, things like stealth rocks and things like spikes will also
yes.
leave you at you'll have a whole extra turn that you can take damage from stealth rocks by having an odd number.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that.
Mhm,
Entry hazards are
mhm.
absolutely a big part. Um, and to confirm, Clangorous Soul does 1/3, so 33.333,
33, yeah.
which gets, again, it just gets so convoluted. Like,
Too many
don't
threes.
don't think about it that hard. Just go odd for the 25 percenters. It's probably even, or it's probably not. I don't know. For the 1/3, you guys can look that up, but just know that it does change something, and you should pay attention.
But
Mhm.
I do also want to preface this that this is all very situational. It's not the end of the world if you
Incredibly.
haven't. It's not the end of the world if you haven't. It's like just if you want to min max your, you want to
Yes.
make it the peak performer. It can't get any better. This is what you want to do.
Oh, let me be clear.
Yeah.
You want to use these tips if you are a seasoned Pokemon player, not if you're just starting out. If you're just starting out, enjoy the game. Really just figure out what the moves do and when to use them. That is all you need to know.
Learn your type chart.
Yes, that's a big one. That's a big
Not
one.
just super effective resistances too.
That can carry you through
Yeah.
most of the game.
Yeah.
That can carry you
Mhm.
through most of the competitive space. I think it's only when you get to like really, really top tier interactions where you're like going up for $250,000 competitions. That's where you really just want to internalize all of these math concepts. Again, you
Rule
like you
factors.
can just
Yeah.
feel it out. You can just feel it out, and you'll get very far doing that. But I think these small things will give you a competitive advantage. That's why we're talking
Mhm.
about it. Um, the second thing, the second tip, and the last one we're going to do before we get into the spotlight for today, which is going to be a big one,
Mhm.
is speed tiers. Speed tiers, you may have heard of these talked about. You may have heard speed tiers discussed by pro YouTubers or anybody that you listen to, really, if you're in the competitive space. But there are lists online like this one that I'll post up here from Trainer Tower about every Pokemon in the game, in this case Sword and Shield, ranked by their total speed. It's
Mhm.
super, super helpful in understanding your team's weakness in terms of speed, since you'll be able to check notable Pokemon that can take yours out before you really have the chance in game to do anything. Uh, Big example of this is Dragapult.
Yeah.
Dragapult you'll see in so many teams, uh,
The
and
only
even
reason
analytics.
Kevin still wins.
Exactly, right? Like
The only reason
Dragapult.
I win ranked games.
Exactly. And the reason that you do see Dragapult so much is because its base stats have it as the third fastest Pokemon in the game. Now, this is before things like Choice Scarf. This is before things like Swift Swim. This is before things like Unburden. Um, it is the third base fastest Pokemon in the game. It's only
Mhm.
outsped by a certain few Pokemon, including Hawlucha, actually, which I didn't know.
With Unburden though.
Unburdened
Yeah.
Hawlucha outspeeds
Yeah.
a Dragapult in every single case. There's not
Mhm.
a Dragapult variant that can be outsped by a Unburdened Hawlucha with its burden und. Fun fact, actually, Unburden and Swift Swim, and I didn't know this until I looked this up. They both double a Pokemon's speed,
Yep.
whereas things like Choice Scarf only increase the speed by 50%.
Yeah, double is a lot more serious.
Yes, and
That's why things like Barraskewda
yeah,
will not get outsped by almost anything.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
But if you think about it too, like that is why certain Pokemon like Kingdra, and I mentioned this last week,
Yeah.
Kingdra ruined the Gen 5 OU meta with Swift Swim.
Yeah.
Specifically, Drizzle and Swift Swim were banned from OU because of its insane speed addition. But like
Mhm.
Unburden, it's not on enough great Pokemon to really warrant it being removed from the game. So
Yeah,
you
just a
still
couple of them.
have Hawluchas and stuff. It's fine.
And a lot of those Pokemon, like, they rely solely on Unburden in order to be good. Like,
Yes.
if they don't have it, then they're just kind of,
Right.
nothing
Right.
special.
Exactly.
But speaking of fast Pokemon.
Speaking of fast Pokemon, speaking of Dragapult, our Pokemon Spotlight, our Pokesports Pokemon Spotlight is on Dragapult. Dragapults are currently, I want to say that they have one specific use, but they're so multifaceted because of its crazy place on the speed tier, and because of its
Mhm.
nature. Ghost and Dragon is just such a good typing
So
uh,
good, yeah.
on a Pokemon this fast that it's, come on, it's a non-topic.
Mhm.
Dragapult usually runs Life Orb with the ability Clear Body. The EVs it usually runs are 252 attack, 4 special defense, and 252 speed, all with a jolly nature, increasing your speed even more. So if you think about all that, you have your life orb increasing your damage. You have your speed EVs boosting your speed, jolly nature boosting your speed even more. This thing is super speedy. If you want to choose to take a life orb off of it for Smogon OU and put on a choice scarf, nothing's outspeeding it except for those few Pokemon. But it will outspeed like 90% of everything. You're going to need to deal with it with priority. You're going to need to deal with it with, type advantages or guessing that it's going to be using an offensive variant, but you can very well also run a special variant on it as well and change your attack to special attack. Like,
very versatile.
This Pokemon's
can do it all.
Just nuts. I've seen some tank variants that work. Like, oh man,
Will-O-Wisp.
Yeah.
In VGC Ally Switch, it gets dual screens also. Like, you can do a lot. And something that I do want to take note here is you can see that in this set we have 4 in special defense. That's because if you add it to HP, it'll be an even number. Just to go back on what we were doing before.
Right.
We put it in special defense. Ideally, you can stick it in defense too. Just ideally not in HP because you don't want that even HP.
It doesn't have anything that benefits from that.
Yeah. So just to not waste the stat, we put it in special defense.
There you go. Typically, Dragapults will run Phantom Force, Protect, Sucker Punch, Dragon Claw. These are the physical variants, of course. Phantom Force, I don't know why they gave this thing Phantom Force, man. Like, it's just, it's a nutso move. Like, I have no words, man.
2-turn move. One of the fastest Pokemon in the game.
It straight up disappears, comes back, breaks through Protect. Your biggest thing that you want to do is protect against other Pokemon. But even in VGC, you do want to protect a lot, but you don't want to protect against this. And sometimes you're going to want to protect for the Pokemon that Dragapult's beside, and then Dragapult's going to come out and hit you with the Phantom Force, and then you're gone.
Now I'm going to explain why this is really relevant on a fast Pokemon. The reason why Phantom Force is really good on a fast Pokemon is because you can avoid an attack first turn.
Yeah.
Essentially, you're the fastest thing on the field. You can go Phantom Force, and a Dragapult is a threat. People double into Dragapult sometimes. So you can go for the Phantom Force, evade 2 attacks maybe, and then get rid of your biggest threat with your adjacent Pokemon.
Yeah.
And then you just get a free attack off on whatever switches in.
Yeah.
It's super relevant in VGC.
Absolutely. So we're not saying that this specific Dragapult variant is the best by any means. Dragapult is a very versatile Pokemon. You can kind of change it up to however you want. But definitely consider using a Dragapult if you haven't yet. If you're one of those people who wants to kind of counter the meta, maybe don't use it. But definitely figure out some cool ways of dealing with it.
Because it is the meta, whether you like it or not.
Exactly.
Now, we just want to take this time to remind you guys that this is the third out of 4 Pokemon that we're going to be spotlighting this month. Next week, we're going to be spotlighting our final Pokemon for this month, and then we're going to be giving them away in a Gleam giveaway at the end of the month. I think so far, what do we have? Obstagoon, Vanillux, and Dragapult.
Yep.
So
that's a good spread.
That's a good list. Yeah, that's a really good list. So keep an eye out for that 4th and final.
Keep an eye out.
We'll make it nice and spicy for you.
Exactly. nice and spicy. Spicy. Do you know where that was from, actually? I'm curious if anybody in the chat knows where that's from too. Well, I mean, yeah, obviously it's from the video. I'm not trying to be that self-referential. So, okay, for those of you who haven't seen it, I put out a video on our Pokesports YouTube channel. It's a stream highlight where I talked about a team that I actually probably used this week. So you'll see that in a bit. But it was a team that was just so spicy that, as I said it, I was immediately brought back to an old SNL clip with Bill Hader. Well, not even that old, probably like 2 or 3 years back when he used to play his character Stefan. and he would like come onto the weekly news or weekend report, I think it was called weekend update. And he would talk about the hottest new clubs, and one of the one of the clubs was just called Spicy, like with that specific voice. Anyway, so that was that Spicy. You can follow Pokesports on Spotify and all other podcast providers at Pokesports. You just look us up, Pokesports Podcast.
Whoa, no way.
Yeah. You can find us on YouTube with the hashtag Pokesports. Just type that into the search bar and you'll come across a couple of our videos. You can subscribe to us there. We put out videos every single day of the dang week. Consistently.
We did it.
We've done it. And watch this week, like 4 out of 7 videos just haven't been uploaded.
Who knows? I'm not here.
Exactly, right?
No, we got them.
Yeah, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Pokesports Podcast and Pokesports Pod, respectively. On Twitter, Pokesports Pod, and Instagram, Pokesports Podcast. Or you can just find us anywhere on the internet. We're probably all around. Yeah, Kevin, where can people find you?
Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, xRazeOvation.
You can find me at StillJustMike on Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. That is going to be all for us today. Hopefully you guys are, asking some questions over in the chat. If you have some questions after this, you can always send them to us at our email at pokesportspodcast@gmail.com. Mike, that's me. I'll be in the chat for a little bit longer to speak with you guys. But apart from that, we will see you next week in person, live on Twitch, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Central and Pacific, I think is like 8:30 or something, 8 o'clock. I don't know how time works. Figure it out. I know a little bit about numbers now. I know like a tiny bit about numbers now, but time zones are just like, that's a whole other podcast on its own.
Hey, Mike, we did it. We made numbers interesting.
I hope so. Let us know what you think. If you want to hear more, if you want to know more about the numbers of Pokemon, just let me know. I'm happy to do another one. Just I don't want this to be boring for you guys.
We're actually starting a new podcast called Pokecalculus.
Oh God.
Follow at Pokecalculus podcast.
It's hosted by nor me nor Kevin, 2 completely other people, because we just can't be bothered.
Pokecalculus podcast.
All right, we'll see you next time. Peace.
All right, goodbye guys. Bye-bye.